Hi there, this is Chance Kazar. I'm going to be giving my presentation on my sustainability solution field trip. And so let's get started with sharing the screen. Awesome. Okay, so this is going to be my presentation, Sustainability Solutions, Urban Agriculture. So here's the table of contents for the outline of the presentation. First of all, I want to start with going over the sustainability issue that pertains to the solution. That's going to be food scarcity. Second, I want to understand try to understand a little bit of the underlying causes that lead to food scarcity, and then take a look at a possible solution of urban agriculture and community gardens. So food scarcity is a complex sustainability issue that impacts over 25% of the world's population. Throughout history, earlier human civilizations, uh, it was more of an issue of famine where they couldn't produce enough food or source enough food to support larger populations. That's kind of what led to what we believe led to a lot of civilizations being nomadic and traveling with the seasons and with the animal herds to source their food. And more in recent day, that's become an issue of crippled food systems, leading to food scarcity. One of the more somewhat recent historical events that kind of outlined it being a more modern version of the issue was the adoption of the Universal Declaration on the Eradication of Hunger and Malnutrition. And so that's going to kind of show the transition from I think it's towards the end of what they call the Neolithic Revolution, which started with hunter gatherers transitioning to agricultural settlements, which allowed for population growth, and then it kind of helped address the issue of famine. And then it comes into present day America, where there's an increasing demand because of large populations. It's more of an issue of distribution relating to food deserts, food systems that are kind of developed for profit that kind of ignore rural and low income communities. And then more present day issues also include things like the environmental impact of unsustainable agricultural practices, as well as a lack of education around seasonal crops and nutritional knowledge, and demanding of the importation of goods. So let's go to the next slide. So it's just a quick little view. This is a copy I found online of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It was put forth by the United Nations oh, I missed it back there, I think. Wow. In 1948, so quite a bit ago. So it just kind of goes over a few things. It's very similar to the Declaration of Independence from America. Discusses the rights of individuals across the globe, things like the rights of every person to live freely, receive equal representation and treatment in regards to government and policing and things like that. And then it also highlights the need to secure access to an adequate standard of living, including food and nutritional needs. So this slide is going to go over food scarcity as a consequence of modern systems. I broke it down into three primary categories: waste, distribution, and impacts. So the first thing I discussed was waste. There's a lot of different kinds of waste that come about in the modern food systems. First of all, one of the first steps is going to be in mass harvesting. That has to do with aesthetic imperfections that also affects it at a consumer level. So some of the harvesting techniques kind of ignore smaller, less profitable pieces of produce that might not make it in a cost analysis model where you're paying for shipping and you have all these costs associated per gram of product. So mass harvesting, they ignore some of the initial production of the food. And then at the consumer level, there's a lot of waste with people not liking the way a certain piece of produce looks, and that's honestly a large problem that even I've called myself out on in the grocery store. And then also product lifespan. So when it comes to the importation of goods, that's they travel a long way. Some of the produce that we eat in America comes a long way from other countries, and it's just a long shelf life. I believe in some cases they use preservatives to help with it, and obviously refrigeration and modern techniques kind of help expand the lifespan, but it is an issue to where most of this food's lifespan is spent in transit, and that does result in some excess waste because of the length of that, and then less time being available to the consumer. um, and I threw out a little fact here that I found on one of my previous papers was in America, 30 to 40% of the food that is produced is wasted. That was a publication included that put forth by the FDA recently this year. I don't think that was even exacerbated due to COVID issues. So this is food waste is a very real issue, especially when food scarcity is an issue amongst global populations and even here in America. The next issue I want to discuss was distribution. Um, so inadequate distribution has kind of led to the establishment of food deserts. These are kind of communities in general areas within urban cities that don't have adequate access to what do you call it? Healthy and fresh food. They're more reliant on grain-based products or corn-based products that aren't quite as healthy, that don't have a short shelf life. Um, and so the people in these areas, they're more restricted to less nutritious options. And I believe that the the establishment of these food deserts has to do with a for-profit infrastructure being the backbone of what we've made as modern food systems. Um, and it's understandable to see from a business aspect. You look at two areas and you say a store would be more successful here in this area versus this area. Um, and so you would place it in the area with more economic activity already present, and that way you can ensure that the business is going to be good. You're going to be able to establish employees and make money. The problem with this being the primary model is that food is a necessity for life. It is directly connected to the well-being of every individual on the planet. And so when you make the primary goal of modern food systems profiting economically and monetarily, you end up ignoring a large percentage of populations, regardless of where you're looking at. Um, and a large issue, I believe, with the distribution in the system also has to do with market demand for imported goods, and this is what I kind of discussed with the waste. Um, the large the large amount of time in transit that these foods are spending, and it's also it leaves a large carbon footprint, not only growing some of the food products that we import, but also um, the distribution and getting them to consumer. It can be very, very damaging to the environment, and so that's going to kind of feed into the third point of impacts. Um, so first, I noted high power stakeholders influencing in market and public perception. This kind of has to do with the ways that in the past, even governmental bodies have been influenced and scientists have been influenced by stakeholders that have gains or losses in the production of food products. Um, they have in the past there have been all kinds of debates over the best healthy diet for Americans, and fat's bad, sugar's bad, etc. um, and there's been all this misinformation over the course of American history, and into modern day that's led to a lot of issues, to not have uh, nutritional health information rooted in science rather than skewed by the people who control the publications and might use that in order to direct food decisions, and lead people to think that it's okay to be eating certain things when it can be much more harmful to consume those rather than fresher produce options or locally sourced meats. The second impact I wanted to go over was environmental damage. This comes in many forms, starting with production. It's going to come. There's a lot of soil erosion, and when it's in the case of monocrops, so they're large lots dedicated to growing a specific crop and in large quantities, can severely damage the quality of the soil. And then using fertilizers can help maintain output, but then you risk nutrient runoff, which is a major contributor to dead zones in the ocean, because it gets into the water shelf, it gets into the water systems, and it gets out into the ocean. And algae, they thrive on, I believe it's nitrogen, and they end up taking the oxygen out of the ecosystems that they exist in, and then it kills a lot of the other life forms. So that's just at the production level. Then you can get into the distribution that has a larger carbon footprint. It has to do with the emissions. And then the waste. The waste is obviously an issue. If that feeds into I'm blanking on the term. Landfills. Excuse me. Thank you. Food waste going to landfills. It's contributing to a major issue. And then another impact is going to be unequal impacts across socioeconomic groups. So, like I stated before, the for-profit infrastructure has made the issues of these systems affect people differently, depending on their income, more or less. If you have a food desert because your area is not as economically thriving economically, then you're going to have less access to food that's healthy for you. You're going to be less healthy. You're going to have a more likeliness to develop health issues. And the likeliness of all this goes down as your income comes up. And so I restated that in the access to food and economic activities. So I'll continue to the next slide, keep this going. So my solution to the sustainability problem of food scarcity is going to be discussing urban agriculture and community gardens specifically. So envisioning a system, I would like to take a moment to kind of look at the idea of urban agriculture as a means of kind of reforming and establishing a new type of food system. And it could be done at any level, in very many places across the world, in my opinion. And it's got a couple primary factors, I believe, that would make it successful. And so these are kind of some of those things I was talking about, or I want to talk about. And so let's see. So first of all, residential production. This includes like household production, community production, schools, local restaurants, having options for households to develop, to have a thriving garden. And if they have the means in their own property, that can severely contribute to food access, and also their monetary means. It can help them help the food be more affordable to many people. And so looking into options for residential production, in whether it's single family households, whether it's multiple family households like an apartment complex. These are all options for developing a more localized production. And so the second variable I want to talk about is community outreach. So this is going to address a few things. It's going to be an opportunity for education for youth and for a large amount of the adult population in modern America, and maybe across the world, where they might not know one about proper food production processes that has to do with agriculture. It can help educate people on proper nutrition, and developing a healthier relationship with food. Um, this could also mean including government programs, as far as food banks, and nonprofits, to help interact with the community and see what the needs are, and then possibly even organizing with the government to create incentives for say a household garden, or volunteering in a garden, just things that promote involvement and taking some of that production into your own under your own means. And these will all kind of help address local scarcity. And so my next point is going to be the equal employment opportunities. So I think that these types of systems or facilities would be a good option for youth engagement, or even employment in some cases, depending on the age and the state regulations. It would be a great way to get youth employed, to get them jobs that are going to have real life application as far as helping them set up nutritional knowledge for the future to be more successful in their own health. Um, and so the next point is the variable models point, and this is key to it being applicable and an option for communities everywhere. Um, so different types of agriculture, like hydroponics or aquaponics. I think that large scale hydroponic facilities based in places like Arizona, or specifically the Phoenix desert, where it's a pretty hot, barren area. It's very urban. It's a very dense city, and so if we can't really incorporate more green spaces to allow for urban gardens, then this is a unique opportunity to still bring that into bring that local production into the city. So hydroponics is just primarily growing the vegetation into water, or an art like not an artificial, but a non-soil based growth medium. It helps you very specifically alter the nutrients in the water, and it can help you be very productive. You can include aspects of water recycling, so you don't actually need more water as time goes on. Compared to classical agriculture, you would still need to bring in more water, but it's much more efficient as far as water conservation goes. There are certain systems I've seen people develop in their own homes with PVC pipes. You basically have roots dangling into the water, and you have a constant flow of water, and you put the nutrients in the water, and the plants get everything they need, and they grow. And it's a very great opportunity to bring local production into urban cities, where the natural aspect of it isn't quite there. And you can even, with these models, you can incorporate local crop variations, seasonal changes. You can account for dietary preferences, and all kinds of things. And so the next point I want to discuss is the sustainable agriculture practices. These are great, primarily for maintaining soil health, which is going to be a huge issue moving into the future. There's already talk about our current practices eroding soil composition and seriously affecting the ability of future generations to continue to meet their own food demand. So maintaining soil health is a huge variable of addressing food scarcity when it comes to intergenerational justice. So practices that help this maintain soil health are going to be crop diversity and rotation. This helps make sure that you don't deplete the soil of any specific nutrients, and then you kind of help restore what you take out with every crop you bring back, which also is done using cover crops. They help replenish certain nutrients that on season crops might take out of the soil. You plant cover crops in the off season to help deliver some of those nutrients back and to keep it thriving. And then a lot of times it is actually those that vegetation is put right back into the soil to help with to keep the carbon aspect of it, to maintain that. And so reducing tillage will also help reduce soil erosion, because it'll help kind of a more integrated, almost like a life form to develop in the soil. And then even integrating livestock to, you could use the cover crops for food for the livestock. You can use their manure as a natural fertilizer. There's a lot of options. And then lastly, I want to discuss infrastructure integration. So a big point, obviously, of developing, all these points of action, all these points that you can address local production and introduce them to rural communities, into urban communities, and in all kinds of ways, is actually integrating these sites into the infrastructure that exists. So being able to distribute these resources through the communities and households that might need them, and even local businesses, if that's an option. And this is essential for ensuring that the production and demand are effectively balanced and reduce waste, making sure that everything is integrated in a functioning system. So now to my actual field trip. So there's actually a community garden just a block down from my road, and I did not even notice it because I usually take another route to work. And it is called Friends in Gasca Gardens. It's a fairly smaller operation. I know that they certainly have some great goals, as an organization, as a community, as people. I think it's a little smaller, and it's kind of lost some traction over the years since it started in 2010. But I hope to get involved and start volunteering there. When I went to visit them, they actually they aren't much in season since the summer in Arizona is so hot. They've kind of winded down the stuff, and as you can see in the pictures here, most of these are little personal lots. So some of them are vacant. The ones right up front are, I believe, the lady I talked to mentioned that they were actually cowpeas. Specifically in one of them, I believe in a couple of them, it's a cover crop, and so it helps maintain the soil health in that bed. And those are actually their beds that they use to produce stuff for for food banks and communities in need. And then I believe one of them is also for youth interaction. So they were established right over here in Chandler to focus on community building and kind of addressing some local food scarcity. And this is a little pictograph that discusses some stuff that I'll talk about in the next slide. So these are going to be the three primary goals that they stated in their brochure that I got while I was visiting. So the first one is going to be to serve. And serve as food, and this is addressing food scarcity. They started with the goal to designate a portion of their plots to grow food, so that they could regularly donate to Tempe Community Action Committee that works with some food banks and stuff in the Tempe area and helping get food to those in need. The second goal of theirs was to educate. That was to educate youth, community members, adults, like no specific group other than those that are willing. So they have collective work days, and they're actually starting the weekend following the due date of this presentation, on their member work days, where they're going to start getting a whole kind of production going. Um, and so they work on making sure everyone's up to date with like what they're going to do, and how they're doing things, and ways they garden. They also have the kids growing plot, and have occasional educational events. I believe they've done stuff with some schools, to just get some kids involved, and see if they gain any interest, and then go from there. And then they also have some opportunities for community involvement, and hope to spread knowledge. They have some social media presence, but not a lot. And their third goal is going to be to cultivate. And this is one I really like. They talked about working on the relationships amongst people that might volunteer there, or have their own plot, or just interact with them. And it's going to involve community engagement and connection with anyone who's involved. And I think it's a great way to cultivate and help increase the resilience of food systems in the local community. And so, following that, I was going to discuss some of the values of urban agriculture, um, and how I see them playing into the solution addressing food scarcity. So, a major factor is community, providing resources, educating the public, and creating economic activities for anyone who is interested and wants to get involved. This is huge. Social sustainability. This is increasing the well-being of the people and the areas that these projects would be established. Reducing impact is another huge factor. Increasing local production eliminates a lot of the long distance distribution, which reduces emissions. Sustainable agricultural practices reduce nutrient pollution and improve soil health, again guaranteeing that intergenerational justice, and helping enable future generations to produce their own food. And then it would also work on improving nutrition and health amongst American communities, or communities anywhere who engage in these operations. It's also going to be a chance to lessen the waste that's produced. Specifically, local production helps increases the food system's capability of meeting local demand without overproducing. And so it's going to eliminate some of the delays within these food systems that they might just use as a chance to overproduce, and then there's an instance of waste. And then lastly, resilient ecosystems. Evolved food systems have the potential to improve the economic opportunity, the environmental interactions, and the social sustainability of communities across the globe. And so this doesn't necessarily just have to do with nature and wildlife ecosystems by reducing the environmental impact. This has to do with urban centers and communities and people and humans, and improving the well-being in regards to all three sustainability pillars. And here are a few of my references, and the required slide citing the people I got the template from. Stop the share. And okay, so thank you for watching. I hope this was informative, and enjoy. Thank you.